Good afternoon, everyone, and how's everyone doing? So, for those of you who do not know me, I'm Dr. John Mole. I teach psychology in the suburbs of Philadelphia, both at the high school and college level. I teach AP Psych, Intro to Psych, do a number of different things. So, today we're talking about early development, and I'm going to try to do something kind of unique here. You might hear a little baby crying in the background. That little baby is Theodore, age 2 months. He is my youngest son, born in January, and I'm going to try to, at least for part of this, demonstrate infant reflexes. So we'll see how this goes. It might work out rather well, or this might be a total train wreck. But if the latter, it will only be for a short amount of time. Meet Theodore Mole, my little son here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go out of order because he might be feeding time very soon. I want to try to show you different reflexes here that occur in these stages. So, all right, should be right about there. Okay, so hopefully you see a whole different types of I should see 8 there. Do you see like 8 sucking, rooting? You see those there? Again, just want to make sure that those are someone that's awesome. Okay. So here's the interesting thing. I'm going to try to demonstrate some of these reflexes here. Now, the sucking reflex is a reflex that babies have in order to feed. Right now, he's not looking at the camera, and that's okay. But here I have my hand. I'm going to take my finger, and yes, I did wash my hands. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see if I can try to get it into his mouth, see what happens. If it there he goes. Hard to see, but he's sucking on it. That is the sucking reflex that a baby has when they're born. When they're born, a sucking reflex, and he's spitting up a little bit there. That's okay. Sucking reflex occurs in order for the child to eat, for breastfeeding or feeding from a bottle. The baby's able to do that. So, okay, the second one I have on there is called the rooting reflex. Rooting is a reflex. Let's see if I can get this off here. I'm going to stroke Theodore's cheek right here. I'm going to stroke his cheek right here and see if I can get this effect. Okay, the rooting reflex occurs when, now he's laughing, or it's supposed to occur. Notice that his mouth is opening and he's going, I'm kind of forcing, there it is. Okay, notice that when I stroke the cheek, okay, it makes him want to go towards the finger or go towards the stimulus that's stroking the cheek. By stroking it, the mouth turns to open towards the stimulus and wants to make the kid eat. That's one way you get a child to eat. You don't just put like a bottle in the child's mouth. Sometimes you have to stimulate the cheek in order for that to occur. Okay. By the way, you can see Theodore, yes? It's not just the screen. Can you also see Theodore too? Because if not, this is okay. Good. All right. So the next one here is called the gripping reflex. Okay, with the gripping reflex, I'm just going to put my finger. He's actually doing it already. I'm going to put my finger in his hand. Watch what happens. What should happen? Okay. Sometimes we do live demonstrations. They don't work perfectly. That's all right. So he has a tendency to want to grip the finger. Hopefully you can see it right there. He's gripping my finger. And this is something that babies tend to do in the first year of life. By the second, third year, this is gone. Actually, sooner than that. And I'm not going to do this, but there's actually images out there of people taking a baby that has a good firm grip on the finger, and you lift the baby way up in the air, and they're actually kind of dangling by the hand. Do not try this at home. But that is the gripping reflex, where a baby tends to grip if something's placed in its hand. Okay, next one's the swimming reflex, which I'm not going to do. The swimming reflex is where you take a baby and you literally place the baby in water. It will actually start to swim in an almost salamander-like fashion. It's not going to swim like it's swimming in the Olympics. It's not going to swim like it's doing the 200-meter breaststroke or something like that. No, it kind of does it in a way to kind of move its body, maybe from an evolutionary perspective, to try to escape if it fell into water, to kind of move its way out. So that is the swimming reflex. If you Google it, you'll find very funny images of babies that are submersed in water and they're kind of moving their bodies, kind of swimming. But please do not try that at home. Babinski reflex is, and I can't take his onesie off right now, it would be too hard to do, but if you take basically if this is a baby's foot and you stroke the foot, a person's foot in general, the toes should curl downwards. But a baby's foot, and I wish I could show you this, maybe it will work, who knows, but if you stroke the baby's foot, okay, it's really hard to see. You might see the toes are curling backwards. And that's what a baby does when, it's called the Babinski reflex, named after Joseph Babinski, who'd first described this. If you stroke the baby's foot, the toes curl upwards. So it's a toe curling reflex that disappears after the first month. Some nursing examinations, if they're doing a full body examination, they'll actually stroke a patient's foot to see if they are showing Babinski into adulthood, because if they're showing Babinski in adulthood, that could be a sign of a neurological problem. But in babies, it's a normal reflex. Moro reflex is sometimes called the startle reflex. Some books differentiate the two. Others say the same thing. This basically, when we're startled, we kind of jump a bit. But the Moro reflex is one where if the baby thinks it is, especially if it's being startled, or if it thinks it's free falling, it will actually have a tendency to want to move its arms outwards. There, just a little bit. There we go. Notice that the arms are kind of flailing outwards there. It's this concept that if the baby is startled or is in fear or thinks it's going to be falling, and no, I'm not going to drop him, it will actually flail its arms out, its arms and sometimes its legs too. It'll make the arms go out like this as a means to perhaps brace for impact. So that is, the Moro reflex, okay? All right, Galant reflex, I have a little icon there of a golfer. Has nothing to do with golfing and has nothing to do with back aches. And this is actually a very subtle one to show, but if you notice that the golfer is kind of tilting its body towards the side on an angle, if I stroke one side of the baby's back, try this here like this, let's see here. Okay, if I try stroking the back, maybe it does this, we'll see. Sometimes it works this way and sometimes it doesn't. It's doing the exact opposite in this case. The idea is if you stroke one side of the back, actually he's kind of hungry, so he's kind of trying to look for food right now. But essentially if you stroke one side of the back, it actually kind of curves towards that side. So that's the Galant reflex. Like I said, if you stroke one side of the back, it goes in that angle, or goes in that direction. So finally, fencing reflex has nothing to do. Oh, I was getting a little cranky there. Last one for this. Fencing reflex is where if you put a baby on its back, and it won't be hard, it won't be easy to do here. It actually would look like this. One arm goes up like this, and one leg goes up like that. All right, you. All right. To kind of assume the fencing reflex, as if it looks like it's fencing. There you go. So here I got a good sucking reflex right now. All right, you're going to be fed just a little bit. So basically, if you place a baby on its back, notice the icon of the baby, or the icon there. One arm is up and one leg is up, as if, while on its back, it's fencing. It's not really fencing, but it's one of those reflexes that occurs there. So those are some of the reflexes. Trying to demonstrate these here with a live participant. Like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. All right. So yeah, I just want to start off with that. And if you give me, again, about 15 seconds or so, I'm going to take him to mommy and be right back. So say goodbye, Theodore. Say goodbye. See you right back. All right. Mommy. Oh, mommy. Thank you for your patience. All right, so like I said, sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't, such as it is. Thank you very much. And hello, Ms. Forbes, how are you doing? So I want to start with that because he just woke up from his nap. And now, because I'm out of shape, I'm kind of winded there. I just want a quick plug for Fiveable's social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and YouTube. The at Think Fiveable. So what we're going to be talking about today, we did infinite reflexes already, are the different parts, the different aspects of early development here. So, and again, I'm out of breath because I'm out of shape. So, all right, we're going to talk about maturation. We're going to talk about developmental research, prenatal development, teratogens and developmental disorders, imprinting, infant reflexes, and something called the critical period, which it got cut off there. I'm not sure why. So I'm going to go through these, and these are things that have appeared in the AP exam to some degree, and we'll go from there. Okay, so it comes to this idea of maturation. Maturation is a term that describes a growth that kind of happens biologically. In other words, it happens in the absence of environmental influences. Environmental influences still happen, but a person is still going to grow physically. It's going to be a lot of the biological changes, the changes in hormones, the changes in body chemistry, the changes in body shape, the changes in size. All those things are going to occur in part, yes, due to environmental factors, but the maturation aspect deals specifically with the biological aspects of growth. That despite whatever environment we might be exposed to, we are still going to show growth and development to some degree. That is the maturation. Even a person who, God forbid, is put in an environment where they're deprived of much stimulation, much nurturance, much love, it still will show growth in some way, this maturation, this type of maturation that can occur. So, all right. So from being a baby all the way to adulthood, there's still going to be growth as maturation. So be aware of that term, growth that just kind of happens, not by itself, but happens regardless of the environment that you're in, as part of your DNA. That is maturation in this case. There are two types of research. Now, perhaps you remember learning about all sorts of research methods in your research methods unit. Observational studies, experiments, correlational research. We often don't get to another type of research until we get to this unit. And it's the difference between cross-sectional research and longitudinal research. When we talk about cross-sectional research, it basically, I should say, when I'm doing any type of research here, I'm interested in comparing ages or periods of development. So, for example, how do children, pardon me, change in time with respect to their attitudes about politics? Or how do they change in time? Or what are the differences between ages with respect to their favorite food? The actual question itself is not important, but I want to compare different ages. And there's different ways, two different ways, major ways I can look at this. Cross-sectional research, what I'm doing here, all at once, I am going to compare different age groups. I'm going to compare children, middle-aged people, and older people when to see what differences there are. So I might say, the question might be, for example, how safe do you feel in this world that we live in? How safe do I feel in this world that I live in right now? And, well, okay, I could ask children, I can ask adults, and I can ask older adults. Now, a problem with this is that, yes, you can do this research. It's very easy to do in that you just do it all at once. You can literally get it all done. If it's a survey, let's say, get it done in a day. But there's differences. that besides the age differences, perhaps the potential age differences between groups, is the fact that each of those age groups have experienced different things in their lives. So, for example, older adults might have lived through the Vietnam War. Maybe they served and went to Vietnam, or were part of the protest movement, or both, or saw it on TV, but they experienced the Vietnam War. Then there are middle-aged adults who they didn't see the Vietnam War, but they did witness 9/11. They saw 9/11. They knew where they were on that day when it occurred. It's a big flashbulb memory review of chapters of the cognition unit there. And so what they remember is different than what the people who are older than they are, those who saw the Vietnam War. And then compared to young children, well, they didn't see the Vietnam War. They didn't see 9/11. But right now, as we speak, they're living through this coronavirus and how coronavirus has changed our lives, how coronavirus has affected us in our literally in our days of how we live our lives, how we're going throughout the day. So in that case, so when you look at that, if the question was, how safe do you feel, how secure do you feel, how positive an outlook do you have about the world that we live in, you might find that because the different age groups, when doing cross-sectional research, have experienced different things in their lives, we call that the cohort effect, because the younger kids are a cohort or a group that have experienced a certain thing at the same time, that the middle adults or middle-aged adults experience a different thing altogether, and then the older adults experience something unique too. Now, yes, those older adults did see Vietnam and 9/11 and are seeing the coronavirus, but the fact is, they've grown up through different time spans and different presidential administration changes and different major things in the world besides Vietnam, 9/11, coronavirus, many other things that could have affected their perspective. So that's the huge disadvantage of cross-sectional research, is this cohort effect. Now, longitudinal research corrects for the cohort effect, because what I'm going to do here is I am going to study the same group of people over time. It's a long study, and that's why sometimes it's referred to as the longitudinal study. It takes a long time. So I will first, maybe they're as babies, maybe when they're children, at some point, I'm going to start with them, let's say as children. I'm going to ask, how safe do you feel in this world? And then I'll ask them again when they're older children, then young adults, and middle-aged adults, and then older age adults, to see if there are changes in their views over time. Whereas with cross-sectional, I'm comparing age groups all at one time. I am looking at the same group of people over a long amount of time. This accounts for the cohort effect because it's the same cohort. In other words, it's one cohort. They're all experiencing the same things. So let's say it's these older adults. Let's say I asked these older adults, what did they experience, what do they think, or what did they feel about their outlook of the world? And they have seen Vietnam, 9/11, coronavirus, and all those things are taken into account. So it definitely makes the cohort effect disappear. But there are several disadvantages with that. One being mortality. Mortality we often think about as death, which can apply here. It means that when we talk about participant mortality, people dropping out of the study, people discontinuing the study. If you're doing a 25-year study, which can be or much longer sometimes, you have the problem of losing people's addresses. Some people pass away. Some people don't want to be in the study anymore. They're sick of being asked every year or every couple of years what they think about their outlook on the world. There could be a number of reasons why you don't have the same people. So you might start off with 500 people at the beginning of the study and end with 300 by the end of the study. And the problem with that, obviously, is that, well, now your samples might not be representative. There could be a reason or something about those people who dropped out of the study or are no longer in the study that might definitely change the result. So that definitely creates a problem with sampling bias. Well, the fact that the sample doesn't represent the population, and issues of external validity. So the other problem is it costs a lot of money, it costs time and money. If I do a cross-sectional study, I could literally do a survey on something like Google Docs or SurveyMonkey, or do a paper and pencil survey, and I can get that data collected in one day. A longitudinal study might take me, years, obviously, and how am I going to get the money to pay for myself to do this research? Pardon me. So that is an issue there. So it each has their advantages and disadvantages, but there was one year where there was an entire FRQ, or I should say there was an FRQ question about the differences, the advantages and disadvantages of cross-sectional versus longitudinal research. So understand those things there. So prenatal development. 3 stages of prenatal development here, and these are not just the 3, sometimes there's subtypes here, but for our purposes, we're going to talk about the 3 basic stages. The first one being the germinal stage, where conception occurs, there's cell division, and eventually those cells, or the zygote, plants itself among the uterine wall. And when this occurs, the placenta forms, where the placenta being this layer of tissue between mother and child that allows nutrients to go from mother to child. The mother can also remove waste from the child. Any waste that the baby creates, the mother can take away through the placenta. It's a kind of like a big spongy layer of tissue that connects mother and child throughout the entire course of the pregnancy. This occurs during the first 2 weeks. And this is not these time frames are kind of approximate. It's not like on day 14, the clouds open up, the light shines down, and the angels sing, and now you go on to the next stage. These are approximate time frames. So the germinal stage happens in the first 2 weeks approximately of pregnancy. The embryonic stage, referring to an embryo, here kind of looks like an odd tadpole almost, where the vital organs are starting to form, the heart, the brain, ears, eyes, other organs as well. This embryonic development occurs over the next 8 weeks approximately, where you start to see it's the second stage. And then the fetal stage is where it kind of starts looking like an actual baby, and we call it the fetus. We see movement, usually around the 4th month, depending upon how the height of the mother and how big the baby is. You start to feel movement around this time. So the baby starts to kick, and you ask any woman who has given birth, she'll tell you, especially if it's the first child, they get really excited by that first kick. Oh, I felt movement, really exciting. And usually by the 9th month, they've had enough. They've heard enough of the kicking or whatever. But it happens at that stage. It also reaches the age of viability. The age of viability being the age at which a child can live independently of the mother. When I say independently, I don't mean the kid's ready to go off to college and study, but can literally biologically function, does not need the connection to the mother, the umbilical cord to the placenta, to breathe, to have blood flow, to have waste being removed. No, instead it is being able to function by itself. Now, what is the actual age of viability? Well, with modern technology, that age is getting smaller and smaller. Usually a lot of textbooks will say 26 weeks approximately, although there are babies who are born earlier than that, who are they will, with the modern technology that we have, do turn out okay, so which is a good thing. So that is when they reach the age of viability. All right. So babies are born, great. Well, we're actually not there just yet, but what about things that could affect prenatal development? One of the things they talk about are called teratogens. Teratogens are substances that can affect adversely, so in a bad way. I don't want to use the word negative because negative reinforcement, negative punishments gets confusing. Adversely, in a bad way, affects the development of the child prenatally. A mother is told not to drink alcohol during the course of a pregnancy. She's told not to smoke during the course of a pregnancy. So alcohol can lead to fetal alcohol syndrome, low birth weight, potential intellectual development disability. intellectual or developmental disabilities. Nicotine can cause birth defects, also developmental disabilities. Should avoid mercury. Because of mercury, should avoid certain types of fish, and the list goes on and on. Has anyone ever here heard of thalidomide prior to me saying it right now? Has anyone ever heard of thalidomide? Anyone here at all in the chat have heard of thalidomide? You don't count, Ms. Forbes. You're a teacher. If you're a Billy Joel fan, you might have heard the song "We Did Not Start the Fire," and one of the lyrics is "Children of thalidomide." So if you ever ask a woman who's ever had a baby or has gone through a pregnancy, they will tell you that one of the most annoying things about pregnancy, other than labor and delivery, was morning sickness. And one of the horrible jokes about morning sickness is that it's not just in the morning. Morning sickness can occur all day, throughout the day, morning, noon, and night. And for some women, it could be just a mild inconvenience or very, very transient. And on the other end, it could be very, very debilitating. They can't get out of bed. They have difficulty functioning. And then everywhere else in between. In the 1950s, a German drug maker I can't remember the name of the drug maker, but they developed this drug called thalidomide. And it seemed to alleviate morning sickness symptoms very readily. And it was amazing that there seemed to be no side effects. And its popularity took off all throughout Europe, into Europe, Australia, Europe, also into the UK specifically. I mentioned the UK because it was very popular there, into Canada. And now we're talking about the early 60s. And thalidomide was brought up for approval for the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. And the director of the FDA, Frances Kelsey, I think that was her name, she refused to approve it. She said that, I don't think it's been tested enough, we don't know if it's safe, and she got a lot of pushback for that. As it turned out, there were babies who were being born to mothers who had taken thalidomide who were having massive birth defects. I'd have pictures up here, but some are very, it was unpleasant for these babies who have grown into adults, but some of the images can be very disturbing. That's why I didn't put them here. But there are others that I had, but I didn't know if I had copyright clearance to put them. But babies who did not have arms or did not have legs, or they had flippers for arms or legs, literally. Low birth weights, intellectual disability, developmental disabilities, stillbirths that were occurring. As it turned out, the drug maker knew that these birth defects, but they either underreported them or covered up the evidence. And that led to a massive, massive lawsuit, understandably so, many years later, where the drug company, I can't remember if it was one drug company or multiple drug companies, but what the point was that they had to pay out massive settlements to survivors because a lot of these thalidomide babies who are now in their 50s are unable, and 60s actually right now, are unable to live as productive of a life as other people because of their physical disabilities. So thalidomide is one of those very well-known examples of a teratogen, something that can affect that can create birth defects, that can affect in a very bad way the prenatal development of a child. So some developmental disorders that can occur that appear in the AP exam: trisomy 21, also known as Down syndrome, is one of the most well-known forms of intellectual disability. And it's from the 23rd pair. There's actually 3 there as opposed to 2, and that can cause intellectual disability, also known as Down syndrome. Tay-Sachs disease is where a person lacks I believe it's an enzyme or an amino acid, I can't remember exactly what, that cannot break down fats or certain types of fats in the body. And what happens is that those fat deposits actually go towards the nervous system and can lead to, or often lead to, death at a young age. It's a something that can occur actually in adulthood, or can late onset, in early adulthood, I should say. That's not very common, but typically it's where they lack that enzyme to another amino acid. I can't remember. Actually, no, it's an enzyme where they can't break down the fats, and that can cause fatality at a young age. PKU is, oh gosh, it's phenylketonuria. I can't remember exactly the rest of it, but if you say no PKU, that's perfectly fine. PKU is something where it's an amino acid, I believe, and the people who have PKU lack a gene, or they have a gene deficiency where they can't break down PKU. And PKU, too much PKU can cause problems. It can cause intellectual disability. If it's diagnosed at a young age, as a matter of fact, most hospital, I think every hospital in the United States, or every birth, they test for PKU, or it's a standard procedure. If it's caught early, then by having a proper diet where you avoid phenylalanine, if you look at the picture there, you'll actually see on most soda bottles, I think maybe it's just diet, I'm not sure, that, thank you very much, phenylketonuria, but if you just know PKU, that's fine. So if you avoid foods, a lot of them protein foods, all with high proteins, if you avoid PKU, you can lead a very normal and productive life. So those are just some examples there. I think PKU has appeared on the AP exam or one of the practice exams somewhere out there, but just some ones to know. Imprinting. Imprinting is a neat thing that humans don't typically do. Or I should say we don't do. It's found in other organisms where at birth, whatever the offspring or the baby, whatever, sees first kind of identifies it as the parent. So it's almost stamped on their mind. Whatever they see, whatever organism they see, whatever being they see there, whatever living organism that's in front of them gets imprinted on their mind, gets stamped on their mind. This is the parent. This is mommy. This is daddy. So it's something that babies don't do. It's something that other organisms do. A name that's associated with this, I believe, is Konrad Lorenz. He does not appear in the course descriptions. I don't actually have his name on here. But Lorenz did a number of neat studies on this phenomenon here. And I have a video to show that illustrates this here. And I'm hoping this works. We'll see. If it doesn't, well, let's take a look. How do we do that? All right. Is the video playing? Oh, do you see a video playing? Great. So I believe that's Lorenz right there. And basically, there were these birds that he was there at birth. He was the one that was there. And so these birds see the Lorenz as mom because he was there at birth. And I'll put this link on the resources page so you can look at this too. And basically, he can go out there, he can call for the birds, and because they see him as the parent, they respond to Lorenz there. So he's able to do that. There's all sorts of cute things here where it's so he calls them, and there's some really neat ones coming up here in just a second. Because these birds imprint it in their brains that this must be mommy. This must be mommy. So, all right. And they're able to land. I mean, no one can call birds like that unless you're mommy. So, okay, watch this. Here's these baby chicks think that that's mommy right there. He gets up and walks away, and they follow. He starts running. They run too. Swimming in the lake there, and they swim with him too because they see him as the parent. They see him as the parent, and they'll continue to do this until they're at a certain growth or a certain age where they can say, all right, we're grown up enough now. Time for me to go. Time for me to leave. But as babies, they have imprinted. Some believe it to be an instinctual thing where it's implanted in our minds. I see it. It gets stamped on my mind. This is mommy. This is daddy. And so that's what happens there. Humans don't typically do that. I should say they don't do that. All right. So infant reflexes I start off with during my, for those of you who joined us late, I had my son here to see if he would do all the reflexes. I could do all of them, but but basically I have those there, the infant reflexes. And if you look at the beginning of this video, you'll see them there. Some are more important than others, sucking, rooting. Moro and Galant are usually ones that will appear as distractors. All right, lastly for today, and again, this was talked about towards the beginning, so lastly for today, I want to talk about what's called the critical period. The critical period refers to a time in our lives early on. And I have it kind of here being birth, but it doesn't have to be birth, although it's kind of debatable where it is. But we'll say from birth to about a certain age, most learning is going to occur, or the potential for learning. So that if I want my child to learn as much as they can and learn languages and learn facts, then I should try to have as much of the learning occur at that time. I'm not going to say that in the first 5 years of life they're going to know everything they need to know or everything in life they're going to learn at that time, but it sets up the opportunity for learning. You might recall from your cognition unit about semantic networks and how memories are kind of these connected used very loosely here, these kind of networks of different synapses that are based upon prior knowledge, and you build on and you build on and you build on it, and learning about that from chapter 2 as well, or not chapter 2, but the bio unit. So what happens here is that if you create those links, if you create those networks, if you create those connections early on, that allows for a lot of optimal or for learning to occur later on in life. But if learning does not occur during the critical period, then a person will be largely unable to learn or be exceptionally difficult to learn later in life. You can't do a study where you do an experiment where you deprive a person of environmental stimuli to see what happens. That would be thoroughly unethical. One of the most well-known cases of this, modern cases, is the case of Jeannie, who, and this was a just totally tragic story. It doesn't even have a good ending. Jeannie was found by social workers in California, chained to a toilet seat, locked in a room. Her parents probably had, or at least one of the parents, or if not both, had mental illness. They just deprived of any type of environmental enrichment. They seldom talked to, seldom taken care of. As a matter of fact, the neighbors even know there was a child in there, and was estimated to be about 10 to 14 years of age when she was discovered. Could not talk, had very limited motor movement, and so it became a very famous case study where they said, okay, can we catch her up? Can she learn things? Well, as it turns out, she was able to learn very basic words. She couldn't make sentences, but she could identify terms. She could learn things, but she could not get to a full type of fluency of the English language. So, and what happens there? Okay, well, when you start off with, at that early age, we have certain synapses in our brain that are set up to do certain things. We learn that pruning can occur, that your brain looks at the synapses that are not being used and says, we're going to break those down. We're going to destroy those. It's inefficient to keep those running. Well, if a person's not exposed to language, if a person's not exposed to, and it doesn't have to be like a Harvard education, but even if it's just watching television, it could be good enough. I'm not advocating sitting a kid in front of a television set all day. That's not what I'm saying. But the point being is that if they are deprived of those opportunities to make connections early on, the brain destroys them and you can't get them back. And so Jeannie, for the rest of her life, never could communicate, but couldn't get caught up because of all that pruning that occurred early on in life. So it turned out to be a very tragic story. Eventually, funding was lost, and the state of California eventually put her in a foster home, and she's still alive today, somewhere, not a foster home, but in a special care home run by the state of California. And she did go through foster homes, and that did not turn out well for her. There was evidence of abuse. Just totally tragic story. But what it tells us is that this early time of life is remarkably important. Now, if I want to, does anybody here speak more than one language, speak a language other than English fluently? Does anyone here? I know I'm not going to test anyone on their lingual abilities. I mean, I can speak German, that's just about it. Anyone here? You would only speak, that's just fine too. But, and so what do you speak besides? I'm not going to ask you. There's a couple people. So what language is it? If you don't mind me asking. Okay, so were you raised with Spanish too? In other words, were you raised with Spanish and English, or raised with one and then later the other? Raised both when you were young? Kind of a mixture of both, or one then the other? Okay, so all right. So what's interesting here is that if let's say I want to raise my children bilingual. Let's say one parent speaks one language, another speaks another language. For example, let's say one of us spoke fluent, like our native language was German, and the other person's native language was English. I want to expose them to English and Spanish early, or German, whatever language it might be, early on. Expose them to both. Yes, there's going to be some mixtures of mixing up the two languages. Sometimes you try to say one word and the other word comes out in the other language. But by creating those early networks later on, it becomes much easier to become fluent in the language. I'm not saying you can't learn language, a second language or third language or other languages later on in life, but it is much easier during that critical period to get exposure to it that optimal learning can occur. So that is the critical period. And that has appeared on an FRQ as well. It's that time where the most learning or potential for learning can occur. Obviously, I mean, I'm not going to teach my kids Theodore. I'm not going to teach him AP Psych right now. But by exposing him to conversation, exposing him to interactions, exposing him to just different stimuli in the environment can definitely facilitate later learning. So, are there any questions I can answer? Any questions I can answer? Any questions at all? So while I'm waiting for any questions, if they do appear, it is, who knows exactly what's going on with the College Board? I'll speak to that real quickly. Just to give you an idea, in 2014, we had a lot of snow in my area. Actually, most of the East Coast, there was a lot of snow. And a lot of schools closed for many days. Ms. Forbes, you're in New Jersey. I think you probably got hammered with a lot of snow that year too. And College Board said, you know what? I know a lot of schools missed. We know a lot of schools missed days, so we'll allow you to take the late test without paying the late fee. That was them helping us. Well, now they're talking about perhaps postponing the test in June. They floated the possibility of a take-home test or a testing at home, online test. So there's a possibility that there could be a very strange, when I say strange, it's like out of the ordinary topic or the possibility of how the exam's going to occur. Is College Board going to make everyone take it on May 12th, I think is our scheduled exam date? I don't think so. I think you might have the opportunity to if you want to, but I think there's going to be other options here because some schools are off for the rest of the school year. I know some states have actually, I think Kansas said we're done for the year. California is mulling it over. And it's probably going to happen in a couple other states too. We're supposed to go back March 30th or March, whatever that Monday is. I personally don't think that's happening. I'm in Pennsylvania. The governor closes down. I think that's going to be extended. I don't know. It's a very strange time. So there is that. Am I raising Theodore to speak German? No, I'm not. I am just sticking with English. I might say a few German words, but that's just about it. It's not to say he couldn't learn German later on. I don't have the fluency in German to do it anyway. It's not that he can't learn German later on, But I do want to expose them to different things. There's a study that was just released about speaking parent-ese to your child, to your baby. It used to be called mother-ese, but as it turns out, dads can be parents too. So it's parent-ese. And it's when you talk to a child, who's a good boy? Are you a good boy? That's right. You might have noticed I was talking to Theodore like that. That higher pitch, but using correct grammar actually there's evidence to show that actually facilitates language learning. So that's my contribution to its critical period. So, all right. Other questions? That was a question from Susan. So this will be stored and saved. I do appreciate. I know a lot of students are on this unit, or they're past this unit. There's, I think a lot. For those of you who are in AP Psych right now, are you in social or in abnormal? Is that where you're at right now? If I could show just by a quick. Are you in social? So, about to start social. Okay. I know there's been some social things done out there. If you tweet to @ThinkFiveable, if you say, hey, we could use some more social psych, they will make stuff for that. They will do stuff for that. And there are several psych teachers who do this type of work, and we'll obviously cater to the demand. I just happen to do development because, well, why not? So, all right. So with that, any other questions? So I'm going to stop there for today. I appreciate everyone's attention. I know crazy times we're in right now. I think everyone could agree with that. If you have questions, again, please email or contact ThinkFiveable. That's the social media. Go to fiveable.me is the website. Make requests, make anything to say, hey, we could use a unit on this. And I can almost guarantee you that there's enough demand or enough request, it will happen. So you want to go over Milgram's and Bardo, Ash, you want to talk about the group dynamics, you want to talk about whatever, I'll be happy to do it. So my pleasure. Good to see you all. So you are returnees. Good to see you again. My next one, I don't know when, it'll be probably soon, maybe next week, maybe the weekend. Don't expect Theodore to show up again. He will probably be much fussier that time, or that were to happen. So, all right, folks, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care.